Well, thank you for joining us on Ken's 5 Plus. I'm Deborah Knapp, and our election coverage continues. And we have a team of reporters tracking local and state races. And we have experts here joining us to help bring perspective to the election results here in Texas. Joining me now, Diane Rath, Secretary of the Republican Party of Bexar County. Thank you, Diane. And Laura Barberena. She is a Democratic communications consultant. Thank you both for being here with us tonight. Well, the presidential race in Texas is over. The AP has called the state for former President Donald Trump. And here are the latest numbers coming in. Donald Trump with 55% of the vote, Kamala Harris with 44% of the vote. That is a big margin. I think that people were expecting that, based on past elections, to be a little tighter. Did people turn out in the numbers that were expected? Diane, let me start with you.
I think people have turned out, but where they turned out, I think, is not quite what people were predicting. We had a very heavy turnout in the Hill Country. I mean, those Hill Country, Kerrville, Kendall County, Gillespie County, Mason, your rural West Texas counties have turned out very heavy. East Texas did. And yet, if you look at the counties along the border and South Texas, and your urban centers of Houston and Dallas did not turn out in early voting quite as much as was expected. We'll wait and see what the final turnout is today with in-person, but I think the Democrats were really counting on having a heavy urban turnout and then the normal turnout along the border in South Texas. And I think it's indicating some of the change in voting patterns that's occurring, particularly along the border.
Yeah, we're certainly not seeing a huge increase in voting here in Bexar County, which is a little disappointing. I don't think we're going to hit 60% when all is said and done. We're probably going to be around 57%, 58%. And again, that's a little counterintuitive, right? Because those first few days of early voting, it's like, oh, we're breaking records. And in politics, Deborah, as you know, we don't really look at hard numbers. It's all about percentage, right? What is the percent of registered voters that are coming out to vote? And it looks like in Bexar County, we're going to probably end up around 58%, somewhere in there. I don't know that we're going to break 60.
And in fact, despite what people were forecasting with those first days of early voting, we really are on the same track for turnout, about like it was in 2016. 2016, 2024 are very, very comparable with voter turnout, the numbers that are voting. You had an exception in 20 because of COVID where all the rules were off. But it's very interesting when you compare 16 and 24.
And then again, all these projections that are being made, the Trump projection, of course, these are all based on early voting numbers, and they kind of get a sense of how many people have come out today. What do we think that, how is that going to really affect the percentages? At the end of the day, what's being projected right now is obviously what's going to happen. It's just too much of a difference to overcome with the votes that are coming in election day.
10%.
Yeah.
Points. And, Kamala Harris went to Houston. They had the big rally. I think they were expecting bigger numbers there with Beyonce and everyone turning out. But that I guess that doesn't always translate.
I don't think it does. I think pop stars, you get publicity, you get excitement, people will come. It's a free concert. Why not, especially if you're young? You can come have fun and go with all your friends. How that translates to really going to vote, to standing in line, sometimes for a couple of hours to vote, is a very different phenomena. And I think also one thing, and it's going to take a little bit more analysis when we have more time, but the early voting, at least in Bexar County, showed that you had an older population, over 70, that turned out to vote more. You had the younger vote, under 30, which did not turn out to vote, and people were counting on that if you were a Democrat. You also didn't have a lot of women turning out. Your women vote was just about the same. In fact, maybe only 1% more than it was previously. So if you have a woman at the top of the ticket and you're really talking women's issues, one would think you would have had a stronger early voting turnout of women, and we didn't see that here.
Yeah, I think you also see a lot of investment in Texas, and certainly in Bexar County. We saw it recently where they sent out all this voter registration to get new voters registered, but not a lot in terms of turning them out, right? So what that means is we get a whole bunch of new registered voters, but they're not coming out to vote. And usually a lot of that work is done on college campuses, so you get a lot of young people being registered to vote, but getting them to vote is just, it's really hard to get them to get engaged and into the process. I think that's part of why they were bringing Beyonce and those kinds of folks, to let them understand how important it is in terms of keeping a healthy democracy, that as many people participate as possible. In this case, it looks like they fell a little short.
And I would say we were very active with voter registration, but really targeting those pockets of people that share the values, that share the philosophy, and that are very interested, but were not registered for one reason or another. And then following up with Get Out the Vote. We've been very focused on Get Out the Vote efforts and very aggressive exercises to make sure people vote and vote all the way down the ballot. Just don't go in and vote top of the ticket, but vote all the way down. And I think what's encouraging is when you see the number of people who did vote in the 4th Court of Appeals race. A lot of people would stop. But when you see that vote continuing and you see the continuing vote for some of the state rep races, it's very encouraging that people did take the time not only to vote, but to vote all the way down the ballot.